Today's News Talk Radio.
After all, we got the best damn staff on the planet.
TNT.
Right. Obviously, before the break, what we were talking about is capture of research institutions, of universities and whatever by big pharma, and them basically directing and manipulating the research so that it shows exactly what they want to, so they can sell their drugs. Now, I mentioned ADHD, and that is because my next guest is an expert on this. He's a clinical psychologist. Welcome to the show, Yaakov Ophir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm honored to appear on your show.
No. I'm honored to have you on the show. I mean, I came across you actually by Dr. Robert Malone, who had commented in his Substack on some research that you've done. So Yaakov, first of all, if you can just give us a little bit about your background, explain what you do, and then tell us about the research that you've been doing into ADHD.
Of course. As you said, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I'm placed in Israel, and more specifically at the Technion. It's Israel Premier Institute for Technology, and but most of the time I'm doing research. I only work as a therapist 1 day a week, and the truth is that my primary field of research is not ADHD. It is actually depression and suicide, and especially in depression and suicide in the age of the digital era. And the reason that I'm located at the Technion is because, which is a technological institution, is because we are developing algorithms to detect suicide risk online. So this is what I do most of the time. But when my son, we have 3 children, my wife and I, and my firstborn son was, today is 11 years old, but when he was only 4, he was diagnosed with this alleged brain deficit, chronic brain deficit, that the only way to manage it, the leading and the key way to manage it is by stimulant medications, which are powerful psychiatric drugs like Ritalin and Adderall and the like. So even though I'm a clinical psychologist and I have a wide training that includes also ADHD, I decided that I need to learn about it a bit more just before I'm starting giving my own child, this young and curious and bright child, giving him such strong medications. And when I entered this field, I was amazed. I was really shocked by my findings. It's not, most of my findings are not my own research. They're just the mainstream literature that I've read. It's not from the fringe of the internet. It's really from the heart of the scientific consensus. And what I discovered really amazed me. So I started writing about it, and when I first wrote about it in Hebrew, of course, for a local newspaper, a leading newspaper here in Israel, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. This short article that I wrote, it became one of the most read articles in that year. That was in 2019, and I suddenly was approached from all the media here in Israel, and they always wanted to interview me. So for 2 weeks, I went on interviews, and then I started receiving attacks from physicians and from scholars, and it was very harsh. And I'm not a politician. I'm not used to this battle. I'm a young scholar who tries to make science accessible to wide audiences. This is what I try to do, and I was also I received also a formal complaint from the Ministry of Health. So I was really worried, and that made me, that it forced me to do my homework, to do the research, and eventually to publish the book that was published only very recently by World Scientific. It's a scientific book, but it's really accessible to parents. And the name of the book is ADHD is Not an Illness and Ritalin is Not a Cure. Essentially, this book is a comprehensive rebuttal of the what we call scientific consensus. So yes, this is in short my story with ADHD.
Fantastic. Well, the first thing I'm going to say is well done you for not kowtowing and keeping your head down. You've clearly gone on to write this book in the face of all of these attacks. And I believe, didn't they threaten to take your license off you?
So they did. It was a subtle threat, but I received a complaint, an official complaint from the Ministry of Health. And it was really scary. So this is actually what set my whole journey, because it forced me to write. I found myself writing a 10-page long answer, a fully referenced answer, and this answer became to be my first Hebrew my first scientific article in Hebrew. And then once this material got evolved and I started doing my own research, I started publishing also in English and writing this book. Remember, I used to write for academic journals, but here, James, this is really, really, really interesting that whenever I publish standard articles in my primary field, which is in psychopathology in the age of digital media, I publish in the top-notch journals, the most prestigious journals in the world. But when I try to write about ADHD and from my critical point of view, suddenly these journals blocked me. They don't let me to publish in the places where I should publish.
And you got a threat from the Ministry from Health. Why do you think that is?
I'm trying not to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm really sticking to science and so I will be very careful in my answer here. In my book, I only dedicate one chapter out of 12 to address this question that is obviously it's a really good question, right? But so let me be very careful here. I'm not sure what are the forces that are involved here. I assume that companies that have much to profit from selling the treatment of choice to ADHD, which are the stimulant medications, they have much to lose if the public understands that ADHD is not a real concept. It's not. I mean, children do have traits that what we call ADHD-like traits. They might be more active than others. They can be energetic. They can be easily distracted. But the chemical imbalance theory, it's a myth. No kid, at least we do not diagnose children with ADHD with objective measures. We do not look in their brain and say, oh, we find this hole in the brain, which is the ADHD. No, ADHD is like all other psychiatric concepts. It's a condition we diagnosed with observational measures, and that means that we look on behaviors, and we humans decide if these behaviors they are eligible to be called a disorder, a psychiatric, or in this case, a neuropsychiatric disorder. So I think they have much to lose if the public understands that ADHD does not meet the required criteria to give a person or a child a psychiatric diagnosis. And I think that they are terrified that the public will understand that these medications they're not effective in the long term. And they have reverse efficacy. That means that if you take them if a child takes these medications for a while, then in the long term, it is expected that the symptoms will only increase. there's a simple explanations to that, and maybe we'll get into that later. And of course, these medications have tremendous amount of side effects and really serious adverse outcomes. But this is also something that we can get into later in the interview.
Yeah, so somebody in the chat, it's actually Jim from the UK, says that the founding father who kind of came up with the ADHD has announced months before he died that it is actually a fictitious disorder. I'm not an expert in this area. Is that your understanding of this?
Yes, let me give you the exact quote. It will take me just a second. I'll find it. It's really beautiful. The person who is sometimes called the father of ADHD is Dr. Keith Connors. We diagnose ADHD using his ADHD scales, and I think in about 2012, maybe later, or something like that, maybe in 2014, he was invited to be a keynote speaker in an ADHD experts conference, and he said, and this is the quote. I bring it by the journalist who brought this quote is Alan Schwartz, who also wrote a wonderful book about ADHD. And here is the quote: the numbers of ADHD, right? The numbers make it look like an epidemic. Well, it's not. It's preposterous. This is a concussion to justify the giving out of medication at unprecedented and unjustifiable levels. So this is his words, not mine. I became a known ADHD critic, but ADHD, Keith Connors, Dr. Keith Connors, God rest his soul. He's from the heart of the mainstream. He's the founder, one of the founders of the concept that is called ADHD, and he understood already about 10 years ago that something is wrong here. Something is off.
Wow. Well, Jim in the chat, well done you for picking up that. I think we've got an expert in the chat here.
Yeah.
Yakov, let's talk about these drugs, Ritalin, and did you say Adderall? What are they? What do they do? And, are these just minor drugs, or, what kind of effect do they have in the long term in terms of side effects and other negative effects?
So we'll start with the fact that these drugs they are called they belong to a cluster of psychoactive drugs that are called stimulant drugs, and in a way their name is confusing because you take a child and you give him a stimulant, but the stimulant makes him more what is the word? More quiet or more. The drug actually depresses the child. It's really hard to think about it because it's something, in my opinion, it's a terrible thing that we are doing to children. But so these stimulant drugs, they work in a very similar way to other illicit drugs like cocaine. And so if you take them for several times, you might feel very that you have powers that you didn't have before, that you can suddenly concentrate for hours and do things that you couldn't do before. But if you take them for a long time, and remember that the conceptuality, the way that ADHD is conceptualized is that it's a lifelong disorder. So you have to take these medications every day. And the scientific consensus representatives, they insist that this is not a school medication. It's a medication that you need to take throughout your life. Otherwise, people will reveal the simple truth that these are just the cognitive enhancers that are prescribed to children to be better at school. But so they tell you, the representatives of the consensus, they tell you that this is a drug that the child has to take in order to prevent all kinds of dangers, including getting infected by COVID. This is a real research that was published in the Journal of Attention Disorders, and this research claimed that children and adults who have ADHD, they should take stimulant medications to prevent being infected or to reduce the risk of being infected and to being affected by COVID-19. This is ridiculous, right? So these stimulant drugs, what they do, if you take them for long periods, you're putting yourself at a great risk to numerous adverse outcomes. It's starting from what they call the non-serious adverse outcomes, which are really, really serious. It includes tics and depression and nightmares and sleep difficulties, all a range of side effects, of unwanted side effects. And
so So you talked about this negative kind of effect that if people take it for a long time, they actually is that because of the tolerance? So over time, you become tolerant to the positive effects of it, so they have less of an effect. But actually, all drugs have got side effects, and obviously these are quite powerful drugs. Is that how the mechanism works?
So it will be hard for me to go into the mechanism here, but you're right that all medications have side effects, but we are talking about medications that are they cross the blood-brain barrier. So they impact our brain, they impact who we are. And like all other drugs that cross the blood-brain barrier, they trigger a compensatory mechanism, because the brain, it identifies these drugs as neurotoxins, and what it does in order to survive, to cope with this attack from this external substance that is put into the brain. The brain, what it does over time, it start demolishing or destroying cells that should receive the dopamine, so once you try to stop the medication, then you see these withdrawal symptoms, which that parents call they know it by the rebound effect. But what is the rebound effect? The rebound effect is a bad sign. It's a bad sign that your child is starting to develop dependency. So over time, if you take these medications, over time you put yourself in a great risk, not only for dependency but also for brain damages. And I hate scaring people. I don't like this discourse, but in this case, this is what the mainstream literature suggests. About 1%. And 1% is a lot, because think about it. So many children are diagnosed with ADHD, and most of them will receive this treatment of choice. So about 1% are expected to develop a severe adverse outcome. And I guess the most known outcome, also acknowledged by proponents of the disorder, is the cardiovascular outcomes. So these stimulants, they put a burden on our cardiovascular system, and over time they can trigger cardiovascular deficits.
Well, listen, Yaakov, thank you so much for explaining all that. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's really worrying to me that we're giving powerful drugs like this to children in the first place, but particularly after what you've explained, which is over the long term, actually, they don't have positive effects. And obviously, there's lots of negative effects. So thank you very much, Yaakov. I hope you'll come back on the show again soon. Have a great day.